The first Battle of Fort Fisher was a naval siege in the American Civil War, when the Union tried to capture the fort guarding Wilmington, North Carolina, the South's last major Atlantic port. Led by Major General Benjamin Butler, it lasted from December 23 to 27, 1864. The Union Navy first attempted to detonate a ship filled with powder in order to demolish the fort's walls, but this failed. The Navy then launched a two-day bombardment in order to demolish the fort and compel surrender. On the second day, the Union Army started landing troops in order to begin the siege, but Butler got news of enemy reinforcements approaching, and in the worsening weather conditions, he aborted the operation, declaring the fort to be impregnable. To his embarrassment, he was relieved 2 weeks later by Major General Alfred H. Terry. Background: after the failed Bermuda Hundred campaign, Major General Benjamin Butler and his Army of the James were assigned to an amphibious expedition against Fort Fisher. Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant had originally designated one of Butler's subordinates, Major General Godfrey Whitesell, to lead the expedition, but Butler, as the commander of the Department of Virginia and North Carolina, demanded that he led the troops himself, and Grant acquiesced. Units for the expedition were selected from the Army of the James and included the 2nd Division of the 24th Corps and the 3rd Division from the 25th Corps, along with 2 battalions of heavy artillery and engineers. Colonel Cyrus B. Comstock from Grant's staff went along to serve as chief engineer. The Union naval expedition under Rear Admiral David D. Porter comprised the largest Union fleet of the war, nearly 60 warships along with the transports to carry the Army troops. Butler also planned to bring the USS Louisiana, which had been packed with 200 tons of powder and disguised as a blockade runner, down to Fort Fisher, run it aground about 100 yards from the fort's sea wall, and blow it up, hoping the explosion would demolish the fort as well. Although many in the Union High Command doubted the plan would work, but it was approved by Lincoln. The final Union plan was for the ships to gather at Hampton Roads, where the Army troops would board the transports. Because the monitors used in the attack had to be towed to Fort Fisher, the Navy would leave with a 12 hours head start over the transports. The warships would refuel at Beaufort, then meet the transports at Fort Fisher, when the Louisiana would be detonated and the troops landed under the fire of the warships. Fort Fisher on Confederate Point, nicknamed the Gibraltar of the Confederacy, was a formidable target commanding the Cape Fear River. It encompassed 14,500 feet squared and was surrounded by a 10-foot parapet on a network of bomb-proofs, most of which were 30 feet high. Many obstructions were laid around it, including landmines, abatis, and deep ditches. There were more than 50 heavy cannon, including 15 Columbiads and a 150-pounder Armstrong gun, behind a 60-foot mound of earth near the sea, named the Man Battery. The fort's garrison of 1,400 men was commanded by Colonel William Lamb. Additional reinforcements were available from General Braxton Bragg at Sugarloaf, 4 miles away. This force consisted of Major General Robert F. Polk's division from the Army of Northern Virginia, which arrived on December 13. Opposing forces: Union Army Expeditionary Corps, MG. Benjamin F. Butler, M.G. Godfrey Whitesell 2nd Division, B.G. Adelbert Ames 1st Brigade, Brevet B.G. Newton M. Curtis 3rd New York, CPT, George W. Warren 112th New York, LTC. John W. Smith 117th New York, Col. Rufus Daggett 142nd New York, LTC. Albert M. Barney 2nd Brigade, Col. Galasha Pennypacker 47th New York, CPT. Joseph P. McDonald 48th New York, LTC. William B. Cone 76th Pennsylvania, Col. John S. Little 97th Pennsylvania, LT. John Wainwright 203rd Pennsylvania, Col. John W. Moore 3rd Brigade, Col. Louis Bell 13th Indiana, CPT. Samuel M. Zent 4th New Hampshire, CPT. John H. Roberts 115th New York, Marge Israel, Walworth 169th New York, Col. Alonzo Alden Artillery 16th Independent Battery New York Light Artillery, CPT. Richard H. Lee Naval Brigade, BG Charles K. Graham, 3rd Division, BG. Charles J. Payne 2nd Brigade, Col. John W. Ames 4th USCT, LTC. George Rogers, 6th USCT, LTC. Clark Royce 30th USCT, LTC. Hiram A. Oakman 39th USCT, Col. Ozora P. Stearns 3rd Brigade, Col. Elias Wright 1st USCT, LTC. Giles H. Rich 5th USCT, Col. Giles W. Shurtleff 10th USCT, LTC. Edward H. Powell 37th USCT, Col. Nathan Goff Jr. 107th USCT, LTC. David M. Sells Artillery Battery E, 3rd U.S. Artillery, LT. John Myrick, Navy North Atlantic Blockading Squadron, Rear Admiral David D. Porter, Line Number 1.0 Us Canonicus, LCDR. George Belknap Us Huron, LCDR. Thomas O. Selfridge, Jr., Us Kansas, LCDR. Pendleton G. Watmer Us Mayopac, LCDR. Edward Potter Us Monidnick, CMDR. Enoch G. Parrot Us New Ironsides, CMDR. William Radford Us Nyack, LCDR. L. Howard Newman Us Pecco, LCDR. Daniel L. Brain Us Pontu Suck, LCDR. William G. Temple Us Sorgus, CMDR. Edmund R. Colhoun Us Unadilla, LCDR. Frank M. Ramsey, Line Number 2 Us Bagnonia, LT. Warrington D. Roth Us Brooklyn, CPT. James Alden Us Colorado, CDRE. Henry K. Thatcher Us Jr. CPT. William Rogers Taylor Us Mackinac, CMDR. John C. Beaumont Us Maumee, LCDR. Ralph Chandler Us Minnesota, CDRE. Joseph Landman Us Mohican, CMDR. Daniel Amin Us Pawtuxet, CMDR. James H. Spots Us Powhatan, CDRE. James F. Schenck Us Seneca, LCDR. Montgomery Sicard Us Shenandoah, CPT. Daniel B. Ridgely Us Susquehanna, CDRE. Sylvanus William Godden Us Ticonderoga, CPT. Charles Steedman Us Tuscarora, CMDR. James M. Fraley Us Vanderbilt, CPT. Charles W. Pickering Us Wabash, CPT. Mellington Smith Us Yantic, LCDR. Thomas C. Harris, Line Number 3 Us Chippewa, LCDR. Aaron Weaver, Us Fort Jackson, CPT. Benjamin F. Sands Us Iosco, CMDR. John Guest Us Monticello, LT. Daniel A. Campbell Us Osceola, CMDR. John M. B. Klitz Us Quaker City, CMDR. William F. Spicer Us Rhode Island, CMDR. Stephen D. Trenchard Us Santiago de Cuba, CPT. Oliver S. Glisson Us Sassacus, LCDR. John L. Davis Sustakany, LCDR. William T. Truxton, Reserve Line Us Advance, LCDR. John H. Upshur Us Alabama, LT. Frank Smith Us Aries, LT. Francis S. Wells Us Anemone, ENs. William C. Borden Us Banshee, LT. Walter H. Garfield Us Britannia, LT. Samuel Hughes Us Cherokee, LT. William E. Dennison us Emma, Lt. Thomas C. Dunn Osceola us Gettysburg, Lt. Roswell Lamson us Governor Buckingham, Lt. John McDermott us Lillian, Lt. T.A. Harris us Little Ada us Morvan, LCDR. Benjamin H. Porter us Maritanza, LCDR. George Young us Moccasin, E.N.s. James Brown us Montgomery, Lt. Edward H. Force on us Nansemond us Arkyla, CMDR. Charles Henry Bromedge Caldwell us Tristram Shandy, Lt. Edward F. Devons us Wilderness, Confederate District of Cape Fear, M.G. William H. C. Whiting Fort Fisher Garrison, Col. William Lamb 10th North Carolina, LTC. John P. W. Reed, Marge. James Riley 36th North Carolina, Col. William Lamb 40th North Carolina, 1st Battalion North Carolina Junior Reserves, Marge. D.T. Millard 1st Battalion North Carolina Heavy Artillery, Co. D. CPT. James L. McCormick 3rd Battalion North Carolina Light Artillery, Co. C. CPT. John M. Sutton 13th Battalion North Carolina Light Artillery, Co. D. CPT. Zachariah T. Adams Confederate Navy Detachment, Lt. Robert T. Chapman Confederate Marine Corps Detachment, CPT. A.C. Van Benthlessen, Hoke's Division, M.G. Robert F. Hoke Haggard's Brigade, B.G. Johnson Haggard 7th South Carolina Battalion, LTC. James H. Ryan 11th South Carolina, Col. F. Hagan 21st South Carolina, Col. Robert F. Graham 25th South Carolina, CPT. James Carson 27th South Carolina Kirkland's Brigade, BG. William Kirkland 17th North Carolina, LTC. Thomas H. Sharp 42nd North Carolina, Col. John E. Brown 66th North Carolina, Col. John H. Nethercutt Connolly's Brigade, North Carolina Reserves, Col. John K. Connolly 4th Battalion North Carolina Junior Reserves, Marge. John M. Reese 7th Battalion North Carolina Junior Reserves, Marge. William F. French 8th Battalion North Carolina Junior Reserves, Marge. James Ellington 8th Battalion North Carolina Senior Reserves, Col. Ormond McCoy Artillery Sutherland's Battery, CPT. Thomas J. Sutherland Paris's Battery, Staunton Hill Artillery, CPT. Andrew B. Paris. Battle. The Union forces prepared to leave Hampton Roads on December 10, but a winter storm hit the fleet for 3 days, preventing the fleet's departure until the 14th. The transports carrying Butler's force arrived at Fort Fisher first, since the Navy took longer to refuel at Beaufort than expected. When Porter's ships arrived on the 19th, another storm hit the fleet, causing some ships to scatter and forcing the Army transports to return to Beaufort. After the storm subsided on the 23rd, Porter decided to start the attack without Butler, ordering the Louisiana to be blown up that night. Near midnight, the ship was towed close to the fort's seawall and set on fire. However, the Louisiana was farther out to sea than the Navy thought, perhaps as far as a mile offshore. As a result, Fort Fisher was undamaged by the blast. The following morning, the Union Navy moved closer to shore and began a bombardment of the fort, hoping to damage the earthworks and forcing the garrison to surrender. Despite firing close to 10,000 shells that day, only minor damage was caused, with 4 Seacoast gun carriages disabled, 1 light artillery caisson destroyed, and 23 casualties in the garrison. Meanwhile, there were 45 Union casualties from exploding guns aboard ships, and the Confederates were able to score direct hits on 3 ships. The transports carrying the Union soldiers arrived that evening. Initially, Butler thought that by exploding the Louisiana and starting the bombardment without the army, Porter had given the Confederates warning that the Union assault was coming and would therefore have time to contest the landings. However, he was convinced to land a reconnaissance party to determine if an attack was still feasible. The landings started Christmas morning, with Brig. Gen. Adalbert A. Mee's division the first to be ashore, while the Navy continued bombarding the fort. The Union troops captured a battery protecting the beach north of Fort Fisher, and accepted the surrender of the 4th and 8th North Carolina Junior Reserve Battalions, which had been cut off by the Union landings. After setting up a defensive line, Ames sent the brigade of N. Martin Curtis towards the fort to see if it could be attacked. Curtis found the land wall lightly defended and was prepared to attack, but was prevented from doing so by Ames. Butler was convinced that the fort was undamaged and too strong for an assault. He had also received word that Hoke's division was a few miles north of the fort, and another storm was forming in the area. All this convinced him to halt the landings and order the troops on the beach to return to the ships. The entire Union fleet then returned to Hampton Roads. Aftermath: the fiasco at Fort Fisher, specifically Butler's disobedience of his direct orders which Butler failed to communicate either to Porter or to Whitesell, gave Grant an excuse to relieve Butler, replacing him in command of the Army of the James by Major General Edward Ord. President Abraham Lincoln, recently re-elected, no longer needed to keep the prominent Republican in the Army, and he was relieved on January 8, 1865. To Butler's further embarrassment, Fort Fisher fell 1 week later when Major General Alfred H. Terry led a second assault against the Confederate stronghold, while defending his decision to break off the attack before the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War. Butler had deemed the fort impregnable. Confederate losses amounted to 5 killed and mortally wounded, 56 wounded, and 600 captured, while the damage caused by the bombardment was quickly repaired. Blockade runners continued using the port as the next ships to arrive did so the very night the Union fleet withdrew, although Whiting and Lamb were convinced that the Union force would shortly return. Bragg withdrew Hoke's division back to Wilmington and started making plans to recapture New Bern.